how are we marketing? How are we entertaining people? Again, on their terms, not on ours, but on theirs. And we're really proud of the history. We're really proud of the success, but we also know that we need to evolve. We need to be bold. What people want today is not what they wanted 20 years ago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Signal in the Noise. I'm your host, Dan Gaynor, leading insights here at Signal AI. And as a Bostonian, I am thrilled to say that this episode is with Adam Grossman, Chief Marketing Officer for the Boston Red Sox. He talks about how a baseball team can be both a private business and a revered public institution, how marketing to people on their terms and the responsibility that they show to their fans, old and new, drive an incredible evolution for the organization, and how the blend of history and tradition versus taking big, bold marketing swings is balanced within the organization. From starting out as an intern to rising as Chief Marketing Officer, Adam Grossman is very much redefining what the world of sports and marketing mean. Dive in to another episode with us for Signal in the Noise. Adam Grossman, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, Dan. Nice to be with you. And we'll round up. I appreciate that. Not a lot of Boston fans round up. This is great.
I think the line would be not a lot of Boston fans know how to do math well enough to round up. That's what they say about us. Well, word of advice for all the youth out there: if you have a hero who you aspire to be one day, start a podcast and have him on it. So, Adam, we are pumped to have you on here. You're beaming in live literally from Fenway right now. And you've got an amazing career arc. You have really been a key role in transforming the franchise and creating what is now Fenway Sports Group. Would love to get a little bit on your career arc. Walk us through college age, Adam, and the journey that you've had to get to where you are today. Was it all part of a master plan? And if not, what were the key forks in the road?
Was it a master plan? Definitely not a master plan, more of a hope. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and my dad was obsessed with baseball. So I got to go to a lot of Ben Indians games and just sort of grew up on kind of the religion of sports. Ended up going to Duke University, and my sophomore year, a friend and I ended up in a class together that was sort of focused on socially responsible enterprises. And from that class, we wrote a business plan that ended up focusing on how we could help a Durham inner city little league. And we kind of knocked on the Durham Bulls door because they were sponsoring that league. And we said, listen, we've got a couple more years left at Duke, and we'd love to help in any way we can. We actually had another student in that class whose mother was a lawyer for the MLB Players Association. And they had this joint venture with Major League Baseball, which on the Baseball Tomorrow Fund. And we wrote a grant our junior year for like $25,000 for all, bats, balls, equipment. And the director of the league was like, this is like Christmas for us. And it sort of started our eyes open a little bit more and say, like, we can probably make more of an impact. And we ended up going on like a $250,000 capital campaign to renovate 2 fields in Durham. I always think like that was kind of the start of my career in sports, because it allowed me to see what the Bulls as a institution, a local institution that meant a lot to people because of sports and their background, could do. And then also sort of this impact of community sports, business, and fans. That project ended up being like $500,000 because they threw in half of it was in kind because of other construction jobs that the owner of the Bulls was working on. And my buddy ended up at the White House. He was Andy Card's chief of staff. I ended up with an internship at Fenway. We had 1 year of overlap even after we graduated where we finished that. So that was the start. I got this internship at the Red Sox, and in a very classic way. I mean, I applied everywhere, got rejected from just about everywhere. And I ended up at the tail end of my senior year at a women's lacrosse game watching a friend of mine, and her dad said, "Hey, I don't know what I can do for you, but if you call me Monday, I'll write you a letter to see," because my friend Larry Lucchino just became the CEO of the Red Sox. So I called him on Monday and kind of was like, I don't know if the guy was serious or not, but I was like, I'll call him. And he ended up writing the letter. And about a month later, I ended up wiggling my way in as an intern in 2002 to Fenway.
No way. And by the way, when you're talking about the Bulls, you're talking about the Bulls from the movie Bull Durham.
Yes, the Durham Bulls.
Isn't that crazy? Wow. And $500,000 for a minor league team at that scale was no less transformative.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. We had myself and my friend and then the assistant GM at the time of the Bulls, who's now the president of the Bulls. We would just work on this 3-4 days a week. And we were dialing for dollars and trying to get sponsors and trying to get other people and parents supporting. It was a very eye-opening experience. It was incredibly motivating to be able to sort of see that project in action, and also to work with community pillars as individuals who have been in the Durham community forever. And just, we were trying to do something great for their kids, or for us, it was pretty eye-opening. And as I said, it was, though, like, I always sort of feel like that was sort of my field of dreams experience. But like when I got to the Red Sox, that was my Bull Durham experience, because it was different when you get in.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, you joined in 2002. By the way, the Red Sox at that exact moment are, quote unquote, like the most cursed team in sports. You're 2 years before Dave Roberts steals second, which I, by the way, was in the stands for, box 137, row FF, seat 4. This is the era, by the way, where they're saying sell Fenway. And that part of Boston is a nuclear wasteland. And this team needs a massive turnaround. I know you were a relatively junior guy at that time, but can you just reflect on like what the vibe felt like? Because you weren't always part of this like incredible success story.
Yeah. There's a couple pieces to dissect there, so I got this internship, and my first day, I was going to be part of baseball operations. I met this guy, name was Theo Epstein. He made fun of the shoes that I was wearing. Like the first day, I was like, oh, okay, this will be interesting. It was the first weekend of June. They were doing a workout for draftees because the draft was a few days after that. And so like the first day, like you walk in and like everyone's taking, like we ended up taking batting practice at Fenway. And I met Theo. I met a guy named Jed Hoyer, who's now the president of the Cubs. Ami El-Sadeh, who's now the assistant GM at the Diamondbacks. That was his first day as well. Brian O'Halloran started a few weeks after that, charting pitches overnight, like in the graveyard shift for Pawtucket games. It felt like this startup, and that happened to have a 90-year-old history and a big brand associated with it. But you could sort of tell Theo was brilliant and so motivated and hungry and just had an extra gene with him. And then also sort of felt like I was part of this team that was kind of building this spaceship that was trying to kind of like to take off and kind of reimagine what was possible. And to be very clear, like my role in that spaceship was like getting people lunch, and at that point, like labeling tapes. Like I was not an engineer by any means, but I was there for 3 months, and then I ended up working for Larry Lucchino, and he needed somebody just to be kind of like a little bit of a right hand. And, when I got to Larry's office, that I really understood what he was doing. It was interesting, like in the baseball operations world, it was very much looking at baseball as a science. And Larry sort of at that point was overseeing all aspects of the organization, but really looked at his office, but also the Red Sox as a public institution that was a private business. And so the idea that, and the way he managed and led, was that you shouldn't have to choose between winning, between baseball, between business, between community, between renovating a ballpark, it could all happen. And a little bit sort of tied back to that experience, on a much smaller scale in Durham that I had, which was like, I felt the same way there. It's like, you don't really have to choose between these things. So when I started working for Larry, my eyes really started to get bigger because I got it, like I understood what he was doing, and I was trying to do my own, support him and support the organization, but across all aspects of the business. And so this was at a time before the digital age. Like I remember early on, everything was on paper, and media relations would have game notes that were stacks of paper. One day, like we ran out of paper during a day game. It was not Six Sigma, but the talent accrual that both Larry and Theo valued, like, was coming. And there was this sort of movement and transition of being bold, being ambitious, and just breaking down walls. And that could be around goals on field, business goals. It could be about letting people on the field, where it was this hallowed ballpark. The whole idea, like Charles Steinberg, who was the head of public affairs, had this idea of like doing a Father's Day catch, 800 people on the field at one point. Like that never happened. And like being able to sort of see that and experience that, knowing how Boston was a pretty parochial place and the history of Fenway, there were sort of lines of demarcation. And Larry was just one of those guys that loved to bust up tradition and rules, even though there was a real embrace of how important history and tradition are to brands and to where the organizations are at that point. So that gave you sort of a little history on, it was sort of a sense of what it was like, especially for a kid, 22 years old, they kind of like fresh out of college. It had a little bit of like an Almost Famous dynamic to it, where you're just sort of like, wow, like this is pretty special, and it's incredible to be along for the ride as long as I can hold on and they don't throw me off the train.
You said a line that I think is just the ultimate narrative for your story there, which is a private business, but very much a public institution, right? I mean, this is Fenway Park, the Red Sox in the city of Boston, in the region of New England, are downright religion, let alone a fun day at the ballpark. And I'd love to hear a little bit about how you've carried that ethos forward now to being chief marketing officer. So tell me a little bit across, was it 4 different world championships, across a huge rise in sports values, across the rise of Fenway Sports Group itself, which we'll get into later. Just tell me a little bit about how you've kept some things consistent, but then also how things have changed as you've arced to being the top guy in marketing.
Yeah, I think the principles from day one haven't changed. They truly haven't. Again, I think the boldness, like John Henry talks about this, and I think he's embodied it over since the day he came here. And I think that has transferred to so many, Larry and Theo and Sam and everyone. You have to be bold. This is also, we work here and we have a tremendous amount of pride about being part of the Red Sox and Fenway sports. But we always talk about this as it relates to the Red Sox. It's like, nobody needs to come to Fenway Park to live. People will go along, whether they come to Fenway, whether they watch another game or not. Like, this isn't food and water and shelter. So when you sort of take that and then rewind that and say, all right, well, based on that, like, we need to make sure that people feel welcome here, that people want to come here, that we are providing an atmosphere, that people are circling their calendars to come to, that's a true destination. How we communicate, whether it's through marketing channels, whether the experience here through ushers, ticket takers, through the product on the field, teams that represent the community and that people can get behind. These are all things that we want to make sure that we're working towards, because again, no one needs to come to a baseball game to live.
And therefore, the bar is that much higher to sell out a stadium, or basically the reason behind some of the changes you've made, for example, having Spartan races or driving ranges or Dave Matthews and James Taylor come do concerts. You very much had to reimagine the space to command that kind of enthusiasm because it is an optional experience.
And on that, looking at Fenway as a public gathering place, and that baseball is a massive slice of that pie chart, but it's not 100%. And that's something, like you just described, that we've really focused on. And I think Sam, more than anybody, has really pushed that over the early part of his career here. But like when we had their first Springsteen show in 2003, that was groundbreaking. This year, we're going to end up doing 12 shows. And the point of this is, we can get into some of this, even within a baseball game or sort of a baseball experience. What we are trying to do is have Fenway Park be this communal gathering place on other people's terms. So even if you are not a huge baseball fan, but you want to come to Star Wars night, or Alex Cooper happens to be here and is throwing a party on the right field roof deck, or we're having, like the first time this year, we're having Brazilian night, or we've had Dominican nights the last several years, or Pride night. Like we're seeing these celebrations and these themes start to grow, which is sort of this component of how are we marketing, how are we entertaining people, again, on their terms, not on ours, but on theirs. And we're really proud of the history. We're really proud of the success, but we also know that we need to evolve. We need to be bold. And we think that hunger has allowed us to kind of be on what we try to feel like is on the forefront of making sure that people feel comfortable and people want to come here to be entertained and be with others. And what people want today is not what they wanted 20 years ago, but the principle of how we operate and how we approach and sort of the mindset hasn't changed in 2 decades.
I think it's such a killer answer, talking about meeting people on their terms, right? You don't need to know what components go into slugging percentage, let alone being able to list every pitcher in the bullpen in order to have an amazing time at this jewel that is Fenway and to interact with the property that is the Red Sox. Let's talk a little bit about your job today, and then talk a little bit from there into some of the exciting innovations and activations and the Fenway Sports Group side of it. But just tell us, like, what is it like right now to be the CMO of the Red Sox, which last time I checked is a $5 billion organization in terms of its value. It's part of Fenway Sports Group, which of course has other properties like Liverpool, the Pittsburgh Penguins, Nesson, even a NASCAR team, as well as real estate holdings and marketing agencies. Like, what is it like to be right now in this huge ship and in this huge role? What is your day-to-day like, and what are you focused on in terms of priorities?
For me, I sort of have kind of what I would say sort of 2 roles. I mean, there is the Red Sox role, which I sort of have grown up focused on the Red Sox. And going back to your question around what's it like, I mean, I think we all feel, and I think this goes well beyond the marketing department, I think the organization, like we have a massive responsibility to our fans. Again, there are fans that have perceptions. There's been a lot that's been talked about us. There's been a narrative out there about we don't care as much as we once did, and we've got all these other toys and these other experiences. While that is true, I can assure you that the focus and the hunger to get a 5th championship has never been higher. We have had, I think we've surprised a lot of people this year, which has been a lot more fun than the last couple of years when, you know, we just haven't played as well on the field. And I think we've been in this sort of weird middle space. A lot of that is about winning. And now I think after a couple tough years, fans can see what not only the future can lead to, but also like what may be here right now. So, you know, having young, dynamic, exciting players at the core of what we're building is fun to watch. I mean, just having like the Yankees were in town a couple weekends ago. I mean, the place was absolutely electric, and it was like classic Red Sox Yankees. It was something to behold. That's fun for all of us. And we all feel it. Like, we feel the wins, we feel the losses. I mean, even as somebody that's been here for a long, long time, it does have an impact. But I think what we have tried to do over the last several years is, on the strategic standpoint from a marketing perspective, is taking the wins and losses out of it. What we are building, and I say we on the build, this is strictly from a marketing standpoint, not from a team standpoint, but hopefully withstand the test of the ups and downs of team performance, because that is going to be up and down no matter what. It's just the nature of sports. But when we talk about some of these components of how are we going after new fans, younger fans, more diverse fans, and sort of widening our tent when the team comes back and we're hoisting World Series championships again, we think those new fans that are coming in, those are only going to increase. And the core fans that we've had for decades on decades will continue to come back. And so, like, our whole focus is how do we expand our fan base and how do we get new fans? And so, again, I won't go back to the details on it, but those components that I think we've been really successful the last couple of years and have actually had really incredible crowds, despite the fact that this on-field success hasn't been there. When that comes back, I think we're going to experience what we've had, frankly, this season, and the roars and the excitement and the electricity on a daily basis at Fenway. So that's the Red Sox. There's some other projects that we can get into. You know, we've got Netflix here this year that is pretty interesting. We've got 2 documentaries coming out on Netflix. One is coming in October, which is an 04 documentary. So it's, the 20th anniversary of 04, and the Barnacle brothers are directing that. With local directors have been part of the Red Sox family for a long time, and they're doing a 3-part series just to retell that story. And I think it's going to be pretty eye-opening for people and really exciting to relive what was a wild, wild chapter in Red Sox history. And then we've got Netflix with us. This is now the 6th month that they've covered us and have been embedded with us. And they started in mid-February in Fort Myers, down in spring training. And they have gotten, I would say, unprecedented access into the day-to-day and the grind of what a season looks like behind the scenes. So it's going to be fascinating to see how that comes out. That's going to be an 8-part series that'll come out in March. And for us, from a marketing standpoint, it's probably the largest thing we've ever done, just based on the sheer volume of subscribers and the global nature that Netflix offers. So, Craig Breslow and Alex and our players have taken a big leap here, and it's not to be dismissed, because this is going back to this sort of component around boldness. Like, this is a bold initiative. We are excited about what it's going to be, and we think it will have a massive impact on the Red Sox, but also equally large impact on Major League Baseball and trying to grow the game globally.
First of all, very, very, very excited to watch both of those. I am a little biased towards the one by the Barnacle brothers, who I also went to high school with. All roads lead back to my high school. But also pretty groundbreaking. And to your point, a continuation of the thread that you said at the very beginning about meeting people on their terms and expanding beyond the core audiences of baseball. I mean, take the Netflix sports stuff we've seen with Quarterback or Receiver or Full Swing or Drive to Survive. We're going to see people who never knew who Rafael Devers, your all-star player, is, and they're going to become absolute super fans. But also talk about the risk and reward from a marketing standpoint. You're making a ask of the organization. Hey guys, I want to embed a camera crew with you every single day of your lives. I want them to go visit the players' homes. I want them to be in the locker room and see really difficult discussions. And you are right in the midst of a very competitive race for the playoffs. Talk about the trust that you need to engender in an organization to pull off some really ambitious marketing initiatives. And by the way, same story for like the City Connect jerseys, which completely revamped the entire visuals of what a Red Sox player would look like. So tell me a little bit about the trust element.
Just on the Netflix side, I think, again, and we'll see how it comes out because we do not have creative control over it. So that's part of it. You sort of give that up. This was 3 years ago, and this project's been 3 years. I would say it's been 3 years in the making. It was like one of those things where, hey, this is maybe an opportunity. And from my seat, we have to push it because you're not doing your job if you're not. I thought there would be like a 10% chance that we would actually do it. The director is a guy named Greg Whiteley, who did Cheer and Last Chance U and just did America's Sweethearts, the Dallas Cowboy cheerleader show that came out. He's an incredibly talented director and looks at the world very differently. And I think it's going to be delivering something that's incredibly compelling and interesting. So I think we were sort of taken by him and his affect and his approach. But I do think it's one of these components of, we couldn't do this if this was sort of just a marketing initiative or if it was pushed on by marketing like that. From a marketing standpoint, I remember saying this in 2013 when we ran the table and all of our players grew beards at the end of the season. And we ended up naming the beards, and Get Beard was our theme and our campaign. But I tell people, like, if I or if anybody from the organization had gone to our players in spring training on day one, halfway through the season, and said, hey, I think you guys should start growing beards, you get thrown out of the clubhouse. Like, that's, no one cares what I think, but what we try to do is sort of see what happens organically, because the players are the product. Marketing is not the product. What we try to do is amplify things. And we're sort of like the crust of the pizza. Like, it's important, we're not playing. And those guys, it's their profession, it's their livelihood. People are really coming to see them. And it's our job to put our players in opportunities and positions to amplify their brands as much as they want, to help the Red Sox brand. And so this was sort of the epitome of that. But on the day-to-day basis, this is a massive organizational commitment. And that literally is Sam Kennedy, Craig Breslow, Alex Cora, and the day-to-day, like Raquel Ferreira. Like, this wouldn't happen without Raquel Ferreira, who's our assistant GM, Abby Murphy, Justin Long in our media relations department, Colin Birch in our broadcasting department, Rachel Blackman, who works with me every day. Like, that's the core team that allows for this to happen. And when you start to have baseball operations, media relations, marketing, like sort of that crossover come together and sort of these cross-functional teams, then things can start to come together. And I think that has been one of the traits that's been very successful for the Red Sox over the last 20 years, which is there's a lot of overlap and there's a lot of continuity and collaboration amongst the different groups. And we've tried to break down silos as much as possible to allow for something like this to happen. Like, sort of like the underbelly of it's been very interesting. And again, to have people like Brez and Cora that are open and receptive and will at least listen and then commit, it's pretty cool to be part of that, especially given the brand and the history and the long legacy that the Red Sox have.
I mean, just talk about a quote unquote company culture. It's pretty meta. You guys are here to amplify and strengthen a team. And in doing so, it's a real team effort. I mean, you mentioned the CEO, you mentioned the GM, you mentioned the manager, you mentioned the marketing team, the PR team. It's a full squad effort. I want to ask about another really cool initiative that I know you worked on, which was the City Connect jerseys. And I relate to this because I was at Nike and we're trying to make baseball fun again. And then boom, out of nowhere, the Red Sox completely flip the traditional uniform script and come out with these like neon yellow uniforms that are really evocative of the Boston Marathon. Of course, the Red Sox play every marathon. Boston Marathon happens, and then there's the Red Sox. They play at the same time. It's a traffic disaster, but it's an amazing moment for the city. I'd just be interested in the same exact question about you subverting tradition while also respecting tradition and bringing something that felt really organic to the city, particularly in light of the Boston bombing and David Ortiz coming out saying this is our effing city is a really inspirational moment for everybody around here. And all of that was sort of tied into this yellow uniform that from the outside, if you didn't have that context, you wouldn't understand. But for the fan base, for the city, it was like downright inspirational. And you don't normally get that out of a uniform change. So talk to me a little bit about that activation.
There's a lot of layers to it, and I'll try to make it short, but it is something that we're proud of. And again, it's easier to be proud of it when it quote unquote works, because we didn't know that it would, because it was a big swing and a complete departure from what we had ever done, but we thought we'd give it a shot. The short of it is, Nike came on the uniform with MLB several years ago. And when that announcement took place, we sort of raised our hands and said, if you're going to do something, we don't know what it is, but like we're up for anything. Like we'd love to be a test partner in some way. Just let us know. And they came back and said, listen, we want to launch this City Connect program. They'd done something similar in the NBA. They said, we do want to launch City Connect. And if you guys are up for it, we could start with you. We said, absolutely, we're in. And they said, and we asked like, well, what's the process? They said, well, we come back and like the storytelling component of these things is really important. And we'll give you several different looks and we'll see what you like. And so they came back and they presented this deck of like 10 different stories. And these were just sort of different lanes of what it could be. And then with a rendering that wasn't baked by any means, but something that might be interesting if it sort of caught our attention. And so we go through a handful of them and we're like, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. And then we get to this yellow one and we're like, oh, okay. Like this is interesting. And they sort of stopped and they're like, are you serious? And we said, yeah, like we were up for this. And they said, well, we just put this in. We didn't expect anybody to really go for it. It's so far off the spectrum. And the design itself was different than what it ended up being, but it was just this idea. There were two things about it. One, that it was sort of about this weekend that was very much Boston's weekend. I didn't grow up in Boston, but the first Patriots Day weekend that I experienced, I was like, wow, like it's really something. And you sort of have to experience it to really understand it here. So we liked that component because it is truly of and about Boston. So that sort of checked the box. And then the other piece was just that it was completely bold and different. And like, if you're ever going to do something, this is the platform and the opportunity to take a massive swing. So we went back and forth. And even like within this lane, there was a yellow one that we continued to work back and forth. Like our design team and their design team worked on it, on the detail of it. Troop Parkinson, who's our head of partnerships, was a really important player in this because there was a yellow one and then there was also like a white jersey that actually looked pretty cool as well. But Troop was one of the guys who was like, listen, if we're going to do this, like, let's do it. Because, to have just like another white jersey, even if it's cool, like we're never going to be able to get out of the box in the same way by doing the yellow. I think we all at the end felt like that was absolutely the right call because what's the downside? And you might as well go for it. The other thing that we talked to Nike about that was important was that to be very clear, like that these uniforms are not for everybody. And that's fine. Just be okay with it because we're not trying to make everybody happy. What we're trying to signal is that we are a team. We talk about this all the time, that we refuse to be defined by our history. And we love it and it's important, but we're not going to be looking back all the time. And this was something very much to look ahead. So we went forward with the yellows. We thought the story made sense. We thought the impact would be big. We didn't know that people would like them. But the other thing that we did, the launch itself and the content and everything that we created was very much localized. Like that was all us because they felt like, hey, it's best to launch this with the people on the team that are on the ground and local. And one of the things that we're really proud of was that the Red Sox have had a shameful history of race for 20 years with John Henry and Tom and Sam and Larry. Many people here have tried to write a new chapter. Like you can't rewrite history, but you try to have a new chapter of inclusion and community. We thought that this could be a tool to expand upon that. And so when we launched this, the platform was not about the marathon, and it wasn't about running, and it wasn't even about Patriots Day or anything. It was really about what we sort of viewed as kind of like a new Boston, and something where the artists and the designers and a more diverse Boston that people don't always think of Boston in this way. And we use these creators to launch these uniforms and to tell their stories on our platform. And so we never looked at this as just a uniform. That's the end result, but we looked at it as a much larger platform to hit on a variety of different opportunities to try to extend our brand, expand our reach, and to try to have people look at us in a different way than maybe they did before. So it ended up that we started wearing these uniforms. We started winning in the uniforms. That always helps. We had a pretty incredible run in 2021. And what's fun is you still see it today. The hoodies and t-shirt, like yellow is a thing now for us, and it will be for a long time. And that's pretty remarkable.
You said it's more than a uniform. And because you guys saw it as more than a uniform, it very much became that, whether it was a symbol for representing all of Boston, not just certain neighborhoods, certain demographics, and also the evolution of the team itself. I know we're getting tight on time. I want to broaden out to the Fenway Sports Group conversation as well. I know you're really focused on the Red Sox, but it's also part of this really cool, emerging, highly innovative sports constellation where you've got an NHL team, the Pittsburgh Penguins hockey team. You've got Liverpool, one of the most storied franchises in all of the Premier League. And you've got these other holdings around racing, around broadcasting with New England Sports Network, the Spring Hill Company, Fenway Sports Management, and even real estate holdings. Tell me a little bit about the lessons that you've learned working in collaboration with these other franchises and entities, but also running your own independent operation, because as I understand it, each of them are very much their own independent business. It's not like you slap a logo on one jersey and it cascades across all the other ones. So how does that work for you? And what have you learned being part of this broader constellation that's really redefining what it's like to witness and engage with sports in this century?
It's just been a fascinating evolution. Like I tell people all the time, like you think about of all the places that I could have landed as an intern in 2002, to see where this has grown is really extraordinary. And it's a testament to John and Tom and Mike Gordon and Linda and Sam and what they've done and their vision. Because, and our latest is that we're now part of the strategic sports group that invested in the PGA Tour. And also prior to that, we are the owner and with Rory McIlroy of the Boston Common Golf team. So golf is now a real linchpin for Fenway Sports Group as well. So it's fascinating. Like I can't begin to describe, like it is a fascinating experience to see the breadth of sports and sort of the business of sports across the globe. Like Liverpool's brand. I mean, I was just in Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago because Liverpool was on tour in the US. They were in Pittsburgh and they had a match there. I ended up, meeting with the Pens in the morning because they're going through a restructure and they're building up their marketing capacity in Pittsburgh. And then, had dinner with Billy Hogan and Ben Laddie, who oversee the business of Liverpool that night. And it was funny. Like I was in the hotel room and Mo Salah, like just hanging out in the lobby. It's like, wow, like, this is FSG. And then, the next day you sort of are on another call just on the PGA Tour. And as they're starting to expand their fan footprint and starting to look at a different chapter for the tour and for the game of golf. And so I feel like I'm sort of really fortunate to just get this like expanded education because you understand the global dynamics, the rights, like something like Liverpool. Liverpool is truly a global business because the English Premier League doesn't have the same rights restrictions that Major League Baseball has, or like the domestic or the NHL. In America, the leagues have the international rights, and that the teams are franchises in the States. When you're in Liverpool, your territory is the globe. And so because of that, the infrastructure of the business is different. The focus of the business is different. Like for the Red Sox, ticket sales are about half our revenue stream. It is very much retail ticket driven. For Liverpool, tickets are a slice of that overall business and revenue pie, but they control their own merch. It's truly global business. It's very, very different. So there's obviously overlaps. We learn a lot from each other. Actually, in September, for the second year, we're bringing these groups together, both the sales and the marketing groups from across FSG together. We did it last year for the first time because I think we're getting to the point where, as our business portfolio and platform has grown, there are opportunities to have greater connectivity between the groups. It doesn't mean that the Red Sox marketing department will oversee the Penguins marketing department. I mean, they need to have their own infrastructure, but there is a ton of collaboration that can happen. You see like LeBron James, who is a partner of Fenway Sports, why very simple, but like walk out in a Penguins uniform jersey prior to a game. Kind of cool, kind of fun. I mean, there's been a lot with LeBron and Liverpool over the years through his connection to Liverpool and also with Nike. And there's a lot now with Nesson and Liverpool and Roush Fenway. So like with media sort of being a central component of all of it, there's a lot of overlap. So it's really fascinating. We're trying to figure this out as we go along about how we can continue to expand the business, expand the portfolio, and take the key learnings from each of these areas and apply them in different ways. But we are excited to have everybody in a couple weeks because it's sort of like a little FSG reunion of sorts as we start to build out what we think is going to be the most interesting chapter for Fenway Sports Group.
Yeah, I mean, it's mind-boggling. I mean, I spend much of my day every day talking to different Fortune 500 companies, and what you've just articulated is really exciting, but also really complicated, and just takes an immense amount of intellectual agility to pull off. I wanted to close out with a bit of future casting with you. You obviously are part of an organization that was really early on Moneyball and data-driven decision-making. I know you've brought a little bit of that to marketing. You've experimented with different generative AI programs, marketing programs. You've looked at data-driven analysis to expand Fenway Sports Group. You mentioned, for example, all the exciting stuff into golf, including, by the way, the creation of a brand new golf concept, this like software and tech-forward league that you referenced that you're co-owning with Rory McIlroy. Would just be interested, whether it's within the walls of what you're doing or broader, what are you excited about with regard to the future of marketing? What are some of the exciting, like either data or technology or software or digital tools that you're excited to explore? Or is it going back to more of the integration across different media platforms, like owning your own streaming service and partnering with another big one in Netflix? I'd just be interested in what you think the future would increasingly look like for folks in roles like yours.
I think marketing is always like the best marketers, and I think the best organizations, whether it's sort of baseball operations or sporting operations or marketing, there is this mix of art and science that goes along with it. So like the tools that, we use for on the Red Sox side for ticket pricing or for engagement or for, how are we connecting and communicating to Danny specifically because you've got different needs. Okay, you've got a daughter versus like, where you were when you were in college. Like that experience and what you're looking for from an experience is completely different. And you shouldn't be seeing the same thing from us on that. There are tools now that can be more precise and more specific and that we can target and customize our communications with our individual fans or individual segments. That's a lot about tech and AI and also the volume and expansion of what we can do. Like we're right now on the Red Sox side, we're going to end up doing twice as many ticket campaigns this year than we did 2 years ago. Like we'll probably be up to like 250 individual campaigns. And, we were at 200 last year. We're early, like ones 2 years ago. You're seeing this expansion. That's because of tools and technology and data. And I do think this component around, for us, connecting marketing, ticket sales, and analytics. Like those are three sort of legs of the stool that are really critical for us. And I think we've got really talented people in each of these groups. But as a sports fan, whether you are watching the PGA Tour at home or you are a diehard Penguins fan or intrigued by what's going on at Boston Common Golf, or someone that's just trying to bring their granddaughter to Fenway Park for the first time. This is all about emotion and inspiration, and it has nothing to do with AI or tech. So the way we wrap it is really important. And I mean, it's even now just watching the Olympics, which seem to have this massive resurgence. The broadcast component, the storytelling component, it's so vital. And yeah, it's about individual achievement, but it's also this human connection and this emotion that's getting the best out of everybody. And that's what sports is all about. So like this Netflix show that we're doing, like you're going to see that. So for us, we can't lose that. Like in a very tech forward, digital forward area, we need to use every ounce of resource that we have, but it needs to be wrapped in instinct and emotion and creativity and color. And I think that from a marketing standpoint, I hope will always be part of that function because that gets the best of both worlds that way.
The human element, in other words, needs to be the centerpiece of everything. Well, I got two things to say to you. First, I'm sorry, because I promised you'd be out of here 10 minutes ago. I truly could have done 2 more hours with you. This has been an absolute bucket list item for me. And I can't wait to hear commentary from the Liverpool friends I have on the UK side of our business and the Red Sox commentary from the US side of our business. I think that everybody's going to love hearing what you had to say. And thank you is the second thing I wanted to say. This has been super illuminating in terms of how you put the real authentic human element at the centerpiece of everything you do, how you respect tradition but aren't afraid to challenge it, and how you're thinking very much about meeting key audiences on their terms. Maybe we'll have you back for a second one if I can drag you in for another. But in the meantime, thank you, Adam Grossman, CMO of the Boston Red Sox, for an amazing episode. This has been Signal in the Noise.